Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera, good afternoon. First and foremost, give yourself a big, big hand for being here on this sleepy Sunday afternoon. Love is a contact sport. You gotta act it right if you wanna play this game. What's love got to do? Got to do with it. What's love but a second-hand emotion? Where do broken hearts go when they can't find their way home? I look in your eyes and I know that you're still there for me. That is to wake you up and baby, cry me a river. Cry me a river. I'll cry a river over you. So today, that's an avenue that we will be going through, all right? And today we'll be talking about hidden hearts, okay? Love is more than a fleeting emotion. It's complex, multifaceted. Dive into the kaleidoscope of love, where each hue reveals a new facet. So, the three panels here with me are an experts of love, I believe. Give them a big, big hand. Next to me is Malachi Edwin Vethamani, whom I have a privilege of translating some of his work that will be published next year. Okay, he's a Malaysian-born Indian poet, writer, editor, bibliographer, academic, and a critic. All right, a professor at Nottingham University with a list of books, including the latest one, "Have I Got Something to Tell?" A big, big hand to Edwin Vethamani. In the middle, we have Yeoh Joanne. I'll call her Joanne, right? Okay. Joanne is a Malaysian residing in Singapore. As a teenager, she dreamed of being, being a cat or a rock star. But instead of spend most of her adult life working in publishing, somehow ending up as the feature editor of Women magazine before giving up for a career in digital marketing. Okay, she got two books to be proud of, okay? Impractical use of cakes in year 2019 and other distraction in year 2024. Let's give it up to Joanne. And our final panelist is none other than Sheung-King, okay, with a pen name of Aaron Tang, a Canadian writer whose debut novel, You Are Eating an Orange, and he got two accolades with him, all right? Okay, award-winning novel for year 2021 Amazon, and year 2021 Governors General Award for English Language Fiction. A big, big hand to Sheung-King. And his latest book is Batshit 7. Is that right? Okay, now without wasting any more time, without much fanfare, all right, let's move on with our simple and casual talk about hidden hearts, love, and grief. All right. Now, panels, is it possible to write a romance novel, short, or whatever it is, accurately depicts how people find love in real world? We'll start with you, Edwin.
The worrisome word is romance. I don't think I write romance. um, find love, um, maybe in all its different complexities, probably possible. Yeah, I think in the stories that I write, do dwell on what people would describe as love, um, the desire to be loved, wanting to love, and most of all, this need for companionship and the kind of risk that people might have to take. So, in my first poetry collection, I've described it as the title is "Complicated Lives," and I think love is not easy, and I won't even attempt to define it because there's such a spectrum of relationship where love is concerned. And in both my poetry and in my short stories, I attempt to dwell on the consequences of finding love if you're lucky. Hope that helps.
All right, let's move on to Joanne. Let's see what is her thing.
Okay, it is on. Okay, so my first novel, Impractical Uses of Cake, when it was classified as a romance, I was enraged. I was enraged. I didn't get over it. I have not gotten over that. Because I find somehow that, well, when we say the word love, we're like, oh yeah, complexities and all of that. But when we say the word romance, we don't think the same thing. Yeah, right? Yeah, romance somehow feels a little tawdry, it feels a little cheap. I don't know why, because we connect the two, right? We connect romance and love, right? But we don't. I don't want it connected with me, right? So so when my book was classified as a romance, it's like, what the hell? Right? Okay. So I went on this tirade. I mean, I'm gonna spare it. Oh, yeah, I haven't actually spared you from the tirade. Great. Um but at the same time, I feel like if we're talking about whether or not novel, film, any sort of work can capture what real love is, right? I feel like the thing is people try, right? It is whether or not you want to write a love story, you inevitably write a love story. Because whether or not you want to, right? Want to think about that. Everything that we do is in some way related to love, the seeking of it, the loss of it, the yeah, right? And it's hard to escape love even if you want it to do that. You have to be very, very deliberate if you wanted to avoid love in every way in a work, a creative work. So I feel like I feel whether or not it's possible, I think it's something that everybody does in some way try for, right? And people fail or not, but it is, I mean, failure or success, I mean, who cares, right? Because in the end, because it is so different to every one of us. And it is, I mean, people, I mean, again, romance and love, right? And I find that a lot of the time we think about love stories as things that are lighthearted, as some things that are maybe not as serious, right? As a novel about war or about, something more tragic is. But love is not light. Love is clumsy. It is awkward. It is horrible. It is, if love were in the air, right, we'd be all running around like headless chickens and we'd choke to death, right? So I feel like it is a difficult topic for anyone and it to tackle. And I feel that the point is we keep trying. And even if we don't want to, we end up doing it.
So Joanne, no intentional following footstep of Barbara Catlin or Milan Boone books, yeah? All right, Mr. Shung, what is your take on that? Romance.
Um, on romance, my first novel called "You're Eating an Orange, You Are Naked" is about two kind of transnational people who are trying to communicate with each other by telling each other like folk tales and stories that exist in the past. And the reason why they kind of do that is because they don't really know how to communicate with each other. They're from so many different kind of cultures and places, and they're often displaced. So they're often displaced, and they're in a way of many time zones at once. So in order to form love or connect with each other, they need to borrow other stories. And I think by finding a way and finding other stories that articulate your feelings and allowing yourself to be understand, I think that is how one finds love.
All right. Okay. There'll be more definition of love. All right. Vast definition of love and how you guys so far incorporated it in your work. Okay. We'll start with you, Mr. Xiong.
in my work, I think the way I incorporate love in my work is I often think about place first. So I was born in Canada, but I grew up in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is a place that's always kind of stuck in a place of nostalgia because it has the history of colonization, it was modernized, left out from the rest of the country. And people often are nostalgic for a past that we don't really know what that past is and it doesn't really exist. And kinda this kind of post-colonial affect lends itself to, like, feelings of, like, loneliness and nostalgia, and those are the moments when you need kinda love the most, right? So when everybody who are coming from the same, like, time and space having these kind of feelings, it makes it really difficult to communicate and connect with another person. And for me, I think people trying to use these historical contexts and make it into an emotion and then use that emotion to tell a story. That's how I use love. It's often not just a feeling, but also an affect that is a response to time, space, and political context.
Well, I guess that's true. We are all infected by In the Mood of Love from Hong Kong, right? Okay. Joanne, okay, the vast definition of love and how far have you used it in your work?
Um, in my second novel, I tackled the subject of sibling love, like the love between siblings, love in the family, and how I think how difficult it is, and how sometimes quite grudging it is, because your siblings, while you love them, you also hate them sometimes in like very equal measure. And the reason why you love them is the very reason why you hate them. Um, and I mean, I'm going to say it personally. I have dealt with this my entire life, clearly, right? Because your siblings are also the people that you love, sometimes mostly because of that shared experience that goes all the way back to when they were born or you were born, whoever came first, right? But you didn't, because you didn't choose them, right? You didn't choose them. And in them, you see all of your faults as well sometimes, right? It makes it very hard to love your sibling, in the same way that you choose to love a friend. Because your sibling is that one person that you can't bullshit, right? That person who knows you so well, right? That even when you try to cover something up or when you lie, they know. And your sibling, that relationship is so fraught and so wrought because they're the first people who betrayed you, right? You're the first people who betrayed you, the first people you competed against. All of these things. This is your sibling, right? And you didn't choose that competitor, that betrayer, that whatever, but at the same time, this is the person that you're, I mean, head to head with, neck to neck with, right? Your entire life. So I feel like that's, I guess, what I was doing in my second novel, right? The one called Deplorable Conversations with Cats and Other Distraction. There is a talking cat in there, but there's also a lot of sibling rivalry and yeah, unwilling love.
Totally agree. No denial. We have no choice when it comes to sibling. How about you, sir?
Thank you. I think the love that I portray in my stories, um, is about love in challenging situations. For example, one of the early stories is about this young boy's love for his uncle. Um, his uncle is someone who he loves dearly, but he's a flawed uncle. He is someone um, who's wonderful when he is, you know, when he hasn't had his share of toddy. The minute he's intoxicated, he is difficult. He is a wife beater. At the same time, this young boy loves his aunt, and he has to reconcile how he's going to navigate this relationship. And especially there comes a point when his uncle is um, is about to die, and he has to decide whether he's going to donate blood for his uncle, and that he feels he can do. But later on, he thinks that when the uncle dies, he will probably have to kiss. It's a kind of an Indian tradition whether you kiss the corpse to say goodbye if you're a close relative. And he's torn between kissing his uncle, though he loves him dearly, but he still cannot accept the fact that this uncle is the same person who abuses his aunt because of the domestic violence he has seen. And eventually, the title of the story is The Kiss. Towards the end of the story, you'll decide who is it that gets the kiss. And again, in other stories that I've written in this collection, I also dwell on interracial relationships, and we live in a very multicultural, multi-ethnic society, and therefore this close proximity uh, between races is something that's very common, and people then have to decide everything. I believe that love comes with a price, and so in the story that is called close proximity, I use this expression, which is actually in Malay, it's halwat. Halwat is the original meaning of halwat is this close proximity with God, as it were. But um, Jakim and other religious departments use the same expression when two people who are not married are found in close proximity. And so the backstory or the backdrop is the May 13, 1969 riots which was racial riots. And so when my two characters then come into a relationship, you have the personal story of love between a Malay girl and an Indian man, and then the backstory of the families coming together, and yeah. So there is violence that's inflicted upon the man because of his relationship with this woman. Um, yeah. So these are difficult but very real situations that Malaysians find themselves in. And the third group of writers, the third group of characters who I dwell on, uh, is, are the marginalized and queer societies. So a lot of my story examine the complications they feel and how their relationship has to be below the surface. They have to find ways in which their love can be invisible. And so this idea of hidden hearts uh, resonates with a lot of the stories that I write. Yeah, thank you.
Right, that's quite a tragedy. And talking about tragedies of love, okay, is it a must for author, okay, to attract readers by using tragedies, or it is just an easy avenue for us to glorify grief, right? Edwin, shall we start with you so that the
Okay.
momentum is still there?
All right. Yeah. I I don't think my stories border a lot on tragedies in love. Um, I don't like firstly killing off my characters, uh, and one of the in the several stories that I have written, one of the most painful incident where this is two young boys, maybe late teens, late teens. They have a very strong friendship. One of them is a mute, and the other is a normal speaking character. And the whole story revolves around them. But uh, if there is an element of tragedy, then it is when the mute character is killed. There's an accident. He can't hear um, the the car coming towards him, and he gets hit. Yeah. So writing that was extremely difficult for me. It was actually based on an earlier childhood experience where a friend of mine was walking in Petaling Street, and the death takes place exactly where my friend was hit by a bus. He was busily teasing some girls across, and he didn't see the bus coming, and we were walking behind him. He lost 4 of his toes but survived. But that kind of must have been a trauma there. So in that sense, when I wrote the story, somehow that space recurred. So I would say that I don't think writers uh, resort to tragedy, and it seems like a bit of a cheap sensationalism. Yeah, but yeah, because love and death are very, very existential, basic uh, emotions that we feel, and uh, as a writer, I'm very careful uh, and respectful of of my characters. So I try to do justice to who they are. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on with Joanne. Joanne, how about tragedies of love being used to attract readers? Have you manipulated that sort of tragedy?
I mean, I hope I manipulate enough my readers, you know. Uh, I mean, I'm a storyteller. I'm not a psychoanalyst or an accountant or anything, right? I make stuff up, right? So, but that said, I don't think that I personally dwell on tragedy quite a bit. I try very much to find the funnier side of very awful things that happen. So I just to give you an example. So what I d- in deplorable conversations with cats, what happens is that there's this guy. So my protagonist, Lucky Lee, right, is a guy with everything, and he's rich, he's good looking. The world basically is his oyster, but one day his sister dies, right? And they're very close, even though, and I said earlier, it's a bit grudging. There's a lot of conflict in that relationship. Um, a year after she dies, her cat begins to speak to him. So her cat just like, hello, hi, where is she? The cat speaks to him. And then now he's dealing with grief, but he's also dealing with, am I mad? Right. So, but there is another love that he is, another kind of weird conflict, not tragedy per se, because now he's dealing with having to have all these conversations with Coconut, her cat, right? Who who talks about his sister Pearl a lot and idolizes her and says things to him like, why can't you be more like Pearl? And this is again like partly because he has always had this over his head. Why can't he be more like Pearl? And the cat now continues the conversation from beyond the grave for Pearl. Why can't you be more like me? Why can't you be a little more useful? Why can't you do things right? So it is sometimes funny, but also I guess like it's a lot of conflict in it. I don't know if this is active manipulation of my readers or not, right? And I don't know how well tragedies or stories about talking cats sell, but there it is.
Okay, let's move on with Mr. Sheung-King. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting question. In my second novel, Batch 7, it starts with a character named Glue. His name is Glenn Wu, and people just calls him Glue. So he's Glue, and then he's already tragic. He wakes up in his bed hungover. He like remembers like how much he drank last night and what kind of drugs he did. And then right off the bat, it's kind of about kind of a character who's tragic unpacking his own tragedy. So later on, we understand that, oh, this is an international student who studied in Canada and now is in Hong Kong. He studied theater and then can't find a job because it's Hong Kong. And then what can he do? He can become an ESL instructor, but he learned a lot of like critical theory. He's trained in like Marxist thought, and he was like decolonialization and kind of against ESL as an institution. So he was like, this is not the right way to teach language. Language is anarchistic. So all these theories are going on in his head. And then therefore, like, he's tragic because of his social surroundings and his choices in life. And then this affect of tragedy is slowly getting unpacked because he needs to now situate himself in this kind of environment that he once called home, but now he's returning to it from a completely different context. And then And then this is set in 2019, so there's a whole lot going on. There's like COVID, protesting, and so and so and so this character needs to understand his own tragedy in order to continue to live. And I think in that sense, it's less of like a manipulation of feelings that the writer is doing on part of the reader, but an unpacking that helps understand the time a little bit better.
Right. We have heard Joanne telling us a fiction about falling in love with coconut. Okay, that is unconventional. So this time around, we want to hear your take on conventional and unconventional love in your perspective. All right, Mr. Xiong. Conventional and unconventional love in your perspective.
Um, there are no kids in the room. I have a character. I have a character who like deals with different forms of naturalism by masturbating to monuments. In my second novel, he's repressed in ways that he can't even articulate, and that's his mode of release. And sweet. And well, I don't know why, but I was awarded a literary award for writing this. Some some institutions think this is okay. Oh, s- and again, my work has more to do with how the body reacts to like ideologies that the society kind of perpetuates. And I also find that so funny, right? It's hilarious that this person is doing that, but it's also deeply tragic. Right. But yeah, so unconventional love.
Right. Joanne, please. Joanne, unconventional and conventional love, your perspective.
I okay, conventional, unconventional. I don't know. I don't know what conventional is. I mean, it's just whether or not the people around you think you're crazy or not, right? It's not that it's I don't know. I feel like l- in my second novel, in this one, I Lucky struggles a lot with with all these conversations with the cat because he feels it is a little odd to be speaking to a cat, and but I don't know if this is completely unconventional. I would if a talking cat spoke to me, I'd be like, wow, I'm I am touched and thrilled, and I want to have this forever. I would not have thought, oh, this is unconventional, me speaking to a cat. I would be like, oh, great. Right. So, but I think so. I think I'm the wrong person to ask about what's conventional and what's unconventional. But also, I think that these today we don't want to label these things anymore. We don't want to say that something is conventional, unconventional, and everything because we everyone has a very different idea of what conventional and unconventional is. I mean, you when you put down that masturbation scene, you're like, yeah, okay, right? It didn't seem like crazily unconventional to you. You're like, yeah, the character does that, sure, right? So, and then my guy speaks to a cat, and the cat talks back, and they have this very lengthy conversations in which she tells him stories. I found that completely okay and completely acceptable at the time. So I think it is up to the reader to decide if you're insane or not, and I leave it at that.
I'm very safe.
Yeah, I was about to utter the same thing. We just leave it to the reader whether it's conventional or unconventional. But Edwin, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think the two labels, conventional and unconventional, are problematic because they're very subjective, and it all depends where you are. The conventions of the society that considers something as taboo and something else as acceptable. Um, so even one of the things that I'm very conscious about when I write is I write largely regarding Malaysian Indian characters and characters from the Indian community. And what is perceived as conventional for most female characters, at least the women, is that, you go to school, you go to university, you get a qualification, and find a husband, and your parents will either arrange a marriage for you if you do not find your own partners. Um, So in a story titled Coitus Interruptus, I well, the title should tell you that it's going to be quite unconventional. So it's about this woman who decides that she will not go down that path, and she decides that she will be sexually active, and that she will have agency over her relationship, her career, and that is seen as unconventional by a group of friends who are all married, some happy, some unhappy relationship. So in that sense, yes, I guess the reader then decides whether it's conventional or unconventional. When I write it because it's something that I want to examine and explore. So I don't decide. I let the readers decide. And lately, when this collection came out, in fact, I was told by certain editors, sorry, we're not able to publish the reviews of your latest work because of sensitive or that which does not fit into the conventions of polite Malaysian society. Yeah. So it's not the writer who decides, I think, whether it's conventional or unconventional. It's the reader, it's the society. Yeah. And though we like to think in Malaysia that we are below the radar because most people don't read in English, and if you write in Malay, chances are my book Coitus Interruptus and other stories might not even have made it to the bookshops. Yeah, thank
We'll
you.
give it a try next year, okay? All right, back to Hidden Heart. Okay, do you think it's healthy to lay out grief, sorrow, desperation in writings? Because most winning literary work showed that particular sign. Do you think it's healthy to do so, Mr. Edwin?
Oh, I think it's again. I would say that these are emotions, they're genuine emotions that we all go through. And if you are writing a story which is about genuine emotions, if you're writing on certain issues that uh, you're sincere about, and you want to dwell on them, um, I think it's not unhealthy. I think it's good to explore these emotions. And for me, as a writer, what I want most is my readers to connect with what they are reading, what I've written. So if they then uh, read something which resonates with them, and whether it's considered by others as healthy or unhealthy, it's immaterial to me. What is important for me is the reader can see the reality of the situations that my characters find themselves in.
Okay, let's move on with Joanne.
I explore grief quite a bit in my latest work. Um, I don't know. Grief pops up again and again. I think in many novels, right? I think in again invariably because as it's part of life, right? We all deal with it. I think the interesting thing is always how we deal with it and how we each of us have our different mechanisms, different methodologies with dealing with grief. And sometimes I think the problem is that we get told that there are ways to deal that are better than others, right? And so I think that that's why I spend a lot of time just exploring in my work, like what grief is, what people shouldn't. I guess it's more like you don't tell someone else how to grieve, right? And the shape of someone else's grief may not be recognizable to us, right? But that doesn't mean that grief isn't present and it isn't real. And I think that that's what a lot of writers do. I think a lot of writers explore their own personal griefs, and through that, I think we it's cathartic for us, right? But it hopefully is also cathartic for a reader, right? Who is not going through the exact same thing because that's not possible, but to be going through similar enough thing or in to understand themselves better, maybe sometimes, hopefully, right? Or to even understand that grief does not have a singular definition. I think that's enough. I think that's why we all do grief so often. Not so much because it sells. I mean, why would it sell particularly, right? But I think because it's so much a part of humanity that we it's something that is almost necessarily dealt with in any novel at all. No.
A very complex area indeed. Okay, Mr. Sheung.
Um, when I think about grief, I also kind of think about honesty and vulnerability that can come through the form of writing. I'm quite interested in the form of autofiction where you kind of fictionalize real aspects of your own life, and then through this kind of fictionalization you're coming to a kind of truth about the place that you're in as a writer, as a person, that you can't otherwise arrive to. And to be able to do that, writing kind of becomes a medium for you to like navigate things like grief, navigate things like frustration, or even different kind of anxieties. I can think of an example. The Canadian autofiction writer Sheila Heti uses like a game she plays, and then she was like, if it's a number, then I'll write like these many sentences about this topic, and she like keeps on doing that. And then what happens is like whatever she's going through in her life at the moment was articulated on the page through a kind of honesty, may it be grief or otherwise. And then I think the writing itself not only helps the other people who are reading it, but also helps the writer themselves process and understand their own situation a little bit better.
A healing process for a writer, definitely. Okay. When we say there's a different kind of love, what sort of possibilities can be presented, Mr. Sheung?
Um, well,
What sort of possibilities can be presented? Yeah.
different forms of love. I mean, you can do things with monuments, but also beyond that, I think forms of love can be formed in relation to community and place. I think a lot of my characters, the one that I mentioned, Glue, feels very displaced and is therefore doing all of these random things to like feel like he belongs a little bit more or feel like he's more comfortable. So I think what love can come from is probably finding community and care that you can, no matter how displaced you are, you still find a sense of belonging to a place. While and it's also important to think of community as a space of individuals and people who recognize your own history, and understand where you're coming from, and the memories and stories that you bring with you from place to place. If Glue was able to find this, maybe he won't be doing all of these disgusting acts, or not disgusting, but interesting acts, unconventional acts.
Joanne, you have explored some of the possibilities. Is there any more possibility of love that you want to describe in your up and coming work, Joanne?
It's out. It's out. But it's I feel like I don't know. I'm not as interested in the different forms of love as I am in the various depths of love. I feel like when we're not always aware of um how we love something or someone, right? And how that affects us, how loss affects us, how we grapple with that idea, right? What it means to love someone, whether because it's not like I said, I mean, to me at least, it's not like a sunshiny sort of thing. So when my character Lucky, when he loses his sister, he faces a lot of stuff like thinking about he doesn't want to love his sister in and need her so much, but she has been that influence in his life. She's been also the main competitor of his life, right? She's been better at everything. Um but when he loses her and he loses the woman that he's been compared to his entire life, there is that loss, right? That comes from suddenly having that vacuum, that void, right? And then not knowing what to do with that, right? And he's also forced to constantly think through the cat, through all these chatting with the cat, right? He is also forced to keep thinking about how much she loved her and why, right? Because very often, I think with family, we get used to the relationship. We get used to the dynamics of relationships with our parents, with our siblings, and everything. And we don't stop to think anymore about why we love them or how much. And I think that's something that I think about more than the different forms of love. And yeah.
Right. Okay, in have I got something to tell you? I believe Edwin has explored some of the possibilities. Would you please share with us?
What was the question again, Regina? Sorry.
There's a
By
different
the
kind of
time
love.
I-
There's a different kind of love.
Yeah.
What sort of possibilities can be presented?
Right. Thank you. Well, that's an interesting question. And if you were, which if you were into some kind of science and fantasy, science fiction and fantasies, I think it opens up a lot of new worlds and possibilities of new ways of loving. And during the pandemic, Amir Mohammed put up this call for Malaysian horror stories, and I thought I would like to write a story which dwell on love in horror genre, and so what started as a relationship between two persons then sort of evolved. The horror part of it was uh, when the pet dog of another character then gets involved in this relationship. I won't tell you the what happens, but that's the horror part of it, and so that was interesting to see how this hybrid love uh, wa- was incorporated into the story. So eventually, when the story was accepted, and I remember Amir as the editor telling to me, "That one not so much horror lah. Yours still got love story inside there." I said, "Yeah, I think that's what it's about. We are basically creatures who desire love, who want love, and this very difficult situation. The characters have to kind of compromise into how to survive their love, um, and so if it means having to have that non-human presence, well, that is a possibility. I think that's the furthest I've explored where love is concerned in a very what some may describe as a unconventional way, because it was basically I was writing genre fiction horror, but yeah. Um, Other than that, I think generally my stories are, are about people trying to connect. For me, that's and if you connect, for me, that is the ultimate gift of love. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Before we move on with our panelists reading excerpt of their work, okay, one final question. Okay. Nowadays, why do we preach so much on self-love? You know, when you read social media, when you read certain young generation's novel, there will always be self-love in it. Sheung-King, your take on it?
Self-love. Um, I think self-love is often articulated in ways that are really kind of aligned with like capitalist aesthetics. Like you see you see self-love being shown on like reels on Instagram, and then you see a person's like life, and then you're like, this time I do this time I do this. Self-love. I recently did a performance in Seoul where me and my partner, the performance was about time, and the concept was to move away from linear time. So we decided to take away all the clocks, put away our phones, and then my collaborator built a sandbox, and then she put a light on the ceiling, a single light that shines light onto the box. And then when she feels like an hour has passed, she would like move the light a little bit. And then every hour that has passed, I will have to improvise some kind of writing. And then the idea was to perform this 4 times over, so it will be like at least 4 hours. Um, but the idea of an hour is completely dependent on the body's feeling of an hour in this case. And then afterwards, one would feel like, "Oh, this must be really hard, like 4 hours just sitting there." It actually went by so quickly. And then before the performance, we were like, "Oh, I didn't sleep well last night. I need more coffee." Afterwards, it was like midnight, and we left the venue. We were like, "We're so awake and we feel great. This is amazing. We should just do this all the time." So I think sometimes what the body needs is that the body's perception of time is very different from like a circle that represents it. And spending some time to focus on what the body actually needs and having a moment of stillness might be very integral to loving oneself, because love is not quantifiable by a circle.
All right. And let's move on to Joanne. Joanne, aren't you bored looking at social media pictures on Instagram with a depiction of self-love? Your take on self-love. The microphone.
Um, I don't think about it very much at all, right? But if I had to think about self-love, it would really be about self-acceptance, maybe, right? Just to accept yourself for who you are, right? And try and figure out if there are things about you want to work on or think about more, explore. Are there things that you want to put in more of into your work or less of into your work? I think I think that's my way of loving myself. Just, I guess, just thinking about if there are aspects of myself that I would like to put out there a little more. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, on, I could just as easily put a face mask on, I suppose, right? Uh, and there's nothing to say that you can't put a face mask on and think about what aspects of yourself you'd like to improve. But I think that's how I see self love, and most of my work tends to be about um identity, about discovering who you are, about coming to terms with who you are and all of your faults and flaws and all of the horrors that lurk in your head, because there is a monster in every single one of us, right? But it is all about that self-love does have to encompass the monster in you, right? And I think that is hard, right? And I think that's what self-love is to me, loving that monster with it.
A total personal acceptance. That's very important. Okay, Mr. Edwin, what do you have?
I think self-love is essential. Before you could love someone else, I think you need to love yourself. But there is this element of moderation. You love yourself, uh, not to an extent that you're obsessed with yourself. And maybe I'll read a very short poem which dwells on this notion of self-love. Let me be my husband. Let me be my husband. Let me love myself first. Let me love myself as I would want my husband to. When my husband comes, I will love him as I have loved myself. He will love the way he can, and if he can't love enough, I have my love in me. The fragrance of my love will suffice where his lacks. Let me be my husband. I am my own love. So um, there has been some response to this poem that is, oh, it's selfish and and that is self-centered. But I felt that it is necessary for us. Should we not find that person who is able to give us the love that we want? At least we have our own love to sustain us. Yeah, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, Joanne, will you please read any excerpt of your choice, okay, from your book?
Hey. The morning is like any other. The alarm goes off at 8:15 and Lucky wakes up alone in bed with the sun creeping in, the room cold from the air conditioner's all-nighter. He picks up the phone. No messages. Good. Lucky stretches. Back to the grind, quite literally. Today he will put in an order for the coffee from the Philippines. And there's that sample to try from that new Malaysian plantation. And that delivery of soy milk is coming today, isn't it? He picks up his phone to check his calendar and he quickly puts it back on the nightstand. Fuck. 27th December, a year to the day. Lucky flips over onto his belly and buries his face in his pillow. He stays like this until he falls back asleep. Later, he dresses and goes to the cafe and makes many, many cups of coffee. At night, he comes home to his sister's cat and they have sardines for dinner before Coconut goes off into the night for a prowl. Lucky stares after her, feeling like maybe he too should go for a walk. But he doesn't. Instead, he goes to the freezer and rummages around among the assortment of containers inside until he finds a tall rectangular box that should have been returned to Anita ages ago. Well, I'm sure this stuff doesn't go bad. He upturns its contents onto a glass plate and defrosts the brown brick-like object in the microwave, then puts it in the oven for a short while until the smell of plum pudding fills the kitchen. Then he douses it with brandy, turns off the lights, and lights it with a match. Watching short blue flames lick the cake, he feels his chest expand, as if a clamp has been loosened. Lucky wonders if this is what death does to the fuckers left behind. Turn them into weepy idiots who set fire to cakes and eat them.
All right. Let's move on with Mr. Shin. Do you have anything to share with us? A short one will do.
Um, this is a very short one. My character Glue is constipated and somebody's hiding a secret from him. Constipation sounds a little bit like simulation, which reminds Glue of the word assimilation. And the word assimilation, what makes him thinks about the sex he's been having for the past month. She's always the one who initiates, who comes to his place knowing exactly what she wants. Glue enjoys how little control he has when she's on top of him. She puts a blindfold on him and ties his arms around the bed. She often slaps him and even chokes him. The lack of agency is the freedom Glue actively invites. Glue is hard. Constipation, arousal, confusion, and a looming sense of depression, and a vague sense of loss are coming together naturally. Bian Bin Bei is constipation. Bian on its own means easy, informal, ordinary, and comfort. Bei, on the other hand, means secret. The words Bin Bei describe this moment better than any English word Glue knows. He stands up and ejaculates into some toilet paper and approaches something like a state of post-nut clarity. There is no point waiting to hear back from the school he interviewed for. Glue feels like he won't get the job. It is time to become an ESL instructor. Thank you.
All right. So love and loss has been translated entirely in Bahasa Malaysia. Okay, but I'll be reading only one short poem for you. Okay, written by none other than Malachi Edwin Vethamani. All right. Warm alone. We were once happy, happy that we were together. Together kept us warm, warm away from cold. Cold is what now I feel. feel that it was false. False it was from the start. The start was the beginning of our end. End was easy. Easy as it was, not the truth. Truth keeps me warm. Warm is what now I feel alone. Malachi Edwin Vethamani. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us on this sleepy Sunday afternoon. All right, authors and art practitioners, we manipulated love, loss, and grief in our work. Hopefully, we'll find a better way to heal all of our readers. And with that, let's give it up to our three panelists here